You can never go wrong with button and buttonholes. They are a classic garment construction technique, and they can be as stylish as they are functional. And like many things in sewing, there are multiple ways to achieve this technique, and your sewing machine can help you along the way. Yes, even for sewing on your buttons. And we are so pleased to be joined by menswear sewing expert Norris Danta Ford to help us do all of these button experiments. So come join us in the lab.
Hi, I'm Amanda Carestio.
I'm Kate Zeinard.
And I'm Meg Healy.
We are the hosts of the Sew and Tell podcast, and we are very excited to start a new series for you called Stitch Lab. In each episode, we are going to cover essential techniques and present inspiring experiments.
I need to put my safety glasses on for this experiment.
Aha.
Oh, great! Wonderful! That was a lot harder than I thought it was going to be.
Wow!
Welcome to Stitch Lab.
I'm so excited. We have a very special guest today on this episode. I think we have the button expert, Norris Danta Ford. Tell us a little bit about yourself, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. A little bit about myself. I'm an instructor at sewedacademy.com, the creator of Dope Men Sew, and just an overall DIY menswear influencer.
Fantastic. And when did you start sewing? When did you get interested in it?
So I got interested in sewing after dating my now wife back in 2016. Prior to that, I worked in the fashion world as a wardrobe stylist. So
wow,
having the styling background with celebrities, athletes, and all that. And once I started dating my wife, I just noticed she used to take these garments. And by the way, the queen of the DIY influencer world. So just having her at arm's length distance to answer questions and all that good stuff. And it just inspired me to be like, you know what, I think I can do this.
Oh, and I just love how you've made a name for yourself in the men's sewing world. It's so inspiring. And I know, like, I'm starting to teach my husband how to sew, and yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and I had
Let's go.
Reached out to me, and I pointed them in your direction. They wanted to learn how to make men's streetwear. And I think a lot more men are sewing, and you're making it so easy and look so cool. So I want to thank you for that, for sure. Now I don't have to sew my husband's clothes for him anymore. He can do it himself. So what projects are you currently working on?
So there is this outfit. I have like this vintage, I think like 70s pair of pants, but I'm making shorts. They are already done, but I'm using my simplicity pattern design, and I'm making it a short sleeve shirt. So that's what I have cut out. I have the interfacing cut out. I just haven't had time to actually sew it up yet. So that's what I'm currently working on.
So is your button-up shirt going to have buttons and buttonholes?
Absolutely. That's one. I love the details of buttons and buttonholes because you can spend so much time on making this garment, and then you can screw it up with the details of the buttons. You could put the wrong buttons on it. You know what I'm saying? It just won't hit the same. So yeah, I'm glad I'm on this episode, and I'm glad to talk about the details of buttonholes and buttons.
I do think that's the hardest part because it really can make or break a project, and I've definitely had some fails in the past. And I think when you get into making buttonholes, there are a couple of tools that you want to have around, and feel free to jump in if you've got a favorite. I think the first one is, of course, your buttonhole foot. I would pretty much be lost without it. I have a lot of faith and trust that when I put it on, it's going to work for me. The other thing that comes really in handy is a buttonhole cutter. And I actually don't have one. I can't believe that I don't have one. How about you guys? Do you have one?
Well, actually, I used to use a buttonhole cutter all the time until I misplaced it. It makes it so easy. You just tap it a little bit and it's cut. And then having a different variety of sizes, because sometimes you have a small buttonhole, a big buttonhole, having a different variety of sizes, you could just always use that one tap. Yeah.
Right.
I was just going to ask about the sizes. You have this tiny buttonhole and this big blade, but I guess if you have a small one, you could
just use
work
it
around. Yeah, work it around.
I usually, if I'm cutting buttonholes, I tend to use my snips, but I've also, if you don't have a buttonhole cutter, there's a quick technique that you can do to put a pin on either side of your buttonhole, and then you're actually going to use your seam ripper to cut into that buttonhole up to those pins. And those pins keep your seam ripper from hopefully going out the end of the buttonhole. But I've also done that.
Oh yeah.
Yo, that's so smart. That's so smart.
Yeah,
Pinning both
yeah,
sides, so you have no
exactly.
choice but to run into the pin. Oh yeah, that's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a handy trick if you don't have the actual cutter.
I know I've been guilty of not once actually, I do this a lot of time. And I take my rotary cutter and I just press it down. It's very living on the edge and I roll it.
That's wild.
Sharpest thing. None of my seam rippers are sharp. My snips are very dull. I should have replaced them years ago. So it's the sharpest thing that I have.
Oh, okay. That made my ears hurt a little bit. But the other tool that we're going to be putting into good use today is the button attachment foot, which I've used just a little bit before because Meg has slowly converted me. I don't know if we're going to be able to get Norris on board with this, but we're going to try.
I don't know.
We'll see how it goes.
I'm a hands-on kind of person. I like to feel my buttons, feel the thread, and I just like the therapeutic of just doing that at the end of my project. I save it to the very end.
I agree. It is kind of nice to take a break from the sewing machine and go a little slower. And then real quickly, probably going to need a seam ripper and also potentially some fray check. So this comes into play after you've cut your buttonhole. You apply this onto the edge and that keeps it from fraying. But I actually don't use this very often. How about you?
I use it all the time.
Do you?
All the time. I do a layer on the top and then I flip it and then do a layer on the other side. So both sides can be kind of sturdy and hard. So once you snip or use a rotary, well, you use your rotary cutters or just your buttonhole cutter, it makes everything tough and it don't fray. And that can also make or break your garment too. You just have frayed ends of your buttonholes and that will pretty much eliminate it, especially if you do both sides.
So you put on the fray check before you cut it open?
Absolutely. Because I'm not sure you're supposed to do it that way, but that's how I've been doing it.
I've used it just a couple times and I just put it on after, but that makes so much more sense.
Yeah, because if you cut first, it's already frayed. You see what I'm saying? So like, if you apply that first, it makes it hard. It hardens it up. So when you cut it, you don't get any fray.
Wow.
Maybe we've just been doing it wrong, Meg.
I think I've just been doing it wrong.
And honestly, I've only been doing it within the past, I think, 8 months. My wife showed it to me, and I'm like, "Why haven't you told me about this?" And she was like, I thought you knew."
What comes out of quarantine? New ways to use fray check, right?
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Oh, wow. This has been so much fun to talk about. You know, there's so many personal things that you do in your sewing practice for buttons. So let's just dive in right to the machine to see how we can actually mark buttonholes, sew buttonholes, and even sew buttons on our machine. Because I threw out my hand sewing nail long ago when I discovered that my machine can do that. So let's hop into the lab and do some button experiments.
Let's go.
Let's do it.
All right, we are in the buttonhole lab. We're all ready, and I have a collared shirt that's from my classic button-up shirt course, but it doesn't have buttonholes yet. So we're going to have Norris give us all his expertise on marking the buttonhole markings. So do you actually, if there is a buttonhole guide in the pattern, do you use that, or do you just always have a preferred way and just mark it?
Yes, I do. I actually do. Because the shirt or whatever garment you're using has already been designed with those amount of spaces within it. So usually I kind of trust that. But there are occasionally sometimes that the way your body might be set up, everybody's body set up a little different. So depending on how yours is set up, you might want to make minor adjustments. So one thing that you can do before actually doing the buttonholes, you can pin where the spaces are. You can put it on, pin it, and see if it fits good. And if it fits good, you can go ahead and use the guide, your buttonhole guide. But in the event that you probably self-drafted or it don't come with a buttonhole guide, I like to start off with it like 3.5 to 4 inches range. And you want to use a marking pen or a marking chalk. I love working with chalk because chalk won't disappear when you get up on the machine. Sometimes chalk can go back. Sometimes marking pens can go by really fast depending on the heat and all that stuff. So yeah. And I like to start from the top. You want to start
Okay, I was gonna ask
up
you.
and then go down because the most important buttons are up here to your neck.
Okay, so what are you working on, Amanda?
Well, I would just say that usually I would, and I think it is best practice to do the buttons kind of last. So I'm working on just a mock-up here, and usually I'd have my full shirt done and my collar attached, but I've just got my plackets finished here. So that's why my sample looks a little bit different from yours, Meg. And I'm curious, before we get started, how closely do you both follow the rule for men's versus women's shirts for the right placket to go on top or the left? Because my secret is I put the placket on top that looks the best.
That's what I do.
Is that wrong? I actually don't care.
It's not that important when it comes to women's wear, but
Yeah.
because it's men's wear, I'm very, onto like the rules, I guess. So the buttonholes are always on my left, so the left is over the right. Also, one thing we didn't mention is proper interfacing. Interfacing is really good to have on your placket because once you start putting that buttonhole in, you want something very stable. If your fabric is not, if your fabric doesn't have texture, if it's not that heavy. So yeah, just having proper interfacing before you're doing your placket will make your buttonholes look even more amazing.
Very good tip indeed.
Okay.
Well, let's get this placket marked.
Okay, so where do we start? How do we mark our first button?
So you mark your first one on the actual collar if you're working with a collared shirt. So I would be doing that one first. That one should be about, I say maybe 3/8 of an inch from the front center. And then you just want to place that dead in the center after that. That should be a good placement for your collar button hole.
So this one kind of goes horizontal, right?
Yes, it goes horizontal and the rest of them will be vertical.
Right, perfect.
Got it.
Look at you, you know what you're doing.
All right, so do you draw, so a center guideline, is the center do you measure from the top stitching to the folds for the placket in the center?
So I put it dead in the center of the placket. And you just want to measure from that top button down 3.5 or 4 inches. And then I just put a dot. I don't put lines or anything because there's more stuff to actually take away. Yeah. Right. So once I just put a little small dot just to indicate where it goes.
Well, that's a good idea. All right. Okay. I have my first dot.
Yeah. And the dot represents the top of your buttonhole. So I don't do the top and the bottom because you're never really going to know where it's going to stop at. So I just only do the top and then it'll end where it ends once you get it up on the machine.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because the foot actually holds the button, right? And so it knows how long to make it.
Yeah.
All right. So then we mark our next button. Would we do it 4.5 down from our first one? Yeah,
you want to equate for that spacing of the actual buttonhole. So you just go down. Yeah. And then also what I do, I have either a shirt I've already made or shirts that are similar to what I'm doing, or you just ready to wear shirts. You just bring that shirt in and place it over the top and just mark those buttons, especially if you already know this is a good spacing. That's always a good tip too.
Oh, that's a great tip.
Yeah.
I probably should have said that first.
No, that's good to know how to do it from scratch.
Absolutely.
And then when you have it perfect, you can just trace it off.
And just thinking for women in particular, sometimes I hate having a button right in between my bust. It's just, I like it a little bit lower. So depending on if I'm what bra I'm wearing too, the buttons definitely change. Yeah. But
so one of my first tips would help with that. Once you pin it and you get it in the correct spacing that you want it, it'll work out perfect.
Mm-hmm.
Fabulous tip. All right. Well, I have mine marked. Do you have yours marked, Amanda?
I think so. I think I'm ready to actually stitch some buttonholes.
Okay, let's go.
All right, we've got our placket marked, and now I'm going to walk you through the steps for how to use the buttonhole foot. And this is if your machine comes with a one-step buttonholer. If not, consider investing because it really makes buttons much more enjoyable, much less stressful. The foot is very big and intimidating looking, but it makes a lot of sense once you kind of see how it works. I've got a button selected here, and I'm actually just gonna open up this foot back here and pop my button in there. And that way, this foot is actually gonna know exactly how long to make the buttonhole for this size button. I'm gonna put it on the machine. And I'm also going to select a buttonhole on my machine. Now, I've got my buttonhole placement marked here, and I'm gonna line it up under my machine. And I'm centering it on my placket, kind of in between my top stitching on my placket. So I've got everything set up. I'm gonna see if this works. And look at that.
Wow.
Looks pretty smooth.
So it looks like you did a great job.
Thanks.
So you have them cut, and do you have a preferred way of actually marking the button placement? Do you do it like a dot right in the middle? What's your process, Norris?
Oh, so when it comes to putting the actual button placements, first
Yeah.
of all, we already have a guide now because we
Right.
have the buttonholes. So once you're done, you take your placket and you lay it over where you're gonna put your buttonholes at. So I take a pin, I go straight down with the pin, maybe just under a 1/4 inch from the top. I don't put my buttonhole in the center. I put it like close up to the top. Yes. So, and then after that, I lift up the fabric and then I put a little dot right there, just to indicate a little dot, just to indicate where I'm going to put my actual button at. So yeah, a lot of people like to do the very center, but you really can't stabilize your button that much from the center. So if you up closer to the top, not too far from the top, maybe just under a 1/4 inch, it should be perfect to place that button.
Wow, that's a great
That's
tip.
so smart. I'm gonna give that a try.
Yeah, me
Yeah.
too. And then speaking of actually putting the buttons on, so I'm going to actually use my machine. This is something that I tried years ago and I've never looked back since. So most machines do come just like the buttonhole, but there is a button foot as well. On my machine, it's just this little clear plastic foot. So I'm just going to pop that on.
I'm gonna do it too, Meg.
You are going to do it too? Great.
Yep.
Okay. So I'm going to pop that on, and then you actually have to change the stitch. So should be a stitch that actually looks like a button. And I remember I thought this was just a decorative stitch that just stitched out something that looked like a button.
Right.
So I am
It's
going
actual
to,
purpose.
Yeah. I was like, that's a cute little applique. So I'm going to change my stitch, and it's basically just a zigzag stitch. And you can adjust the width of it. So you'll need to know the distance between your buttons. I just have a little button with 4 holes right here. But I just position it on and lift my foot and slide my button under and then place my foot down. And then before I put my foot on the pedal, I like to just use my hand wheel and get that needle in there so I know I'm not going to break a needle. And I do it a couple times to make sure it's the right width. So if it hits the button, you might need to widen it or shorten it. So once you do that once, you can go ahead and put your pedal down and do about 10 stitches or so. And then I just cut it and voila.
Hold on, that's
That was
it?
fast.
That-
That was
Oh,
fast.
that's it? Oh my
Yeah,
goodness.
you're in trouble, Norris.
And then,
Wow.
and then since if you only have 2 holes, you would just do it once. But if you have 4, you can either rotate it to do the diagonal. You might just need to widen it, or you can just go down and do it again. So super simple. So now I have a challenge for both of you. I want Amanda to sew a button on by the machine, and Norris, you sew on a button by hand, and we'll see who ends first.
Oh, is she gonna be using that same machine?
She's going to be using that same machine.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah,
I'm sweating.
All right. So I know, Amanda, you have 2 holes in your button, and Norris,
Yes.
you have 4. So to make things fair, just sew 2 holes down. All right. On the count of 3. 3, 2, 1, go.
Okay.
Oh.
All right. Oh my gosh, this is so stressful. All right. One down.
Oh, you already got, you did, oh, there we go.
Oh, you done?
I think-
I'm almost finished.
Norris did a little wrap around a little shank. Did you create?
Yeah, I always secure it that way. Uh-oh.
Nice.
I'll snip that, but I'm pretty much done.
Oh yeah, that looks very secure.
That was so fast.
Wow. All right. So it's a. What do we think?
I don't know. It's pretty comparable.
I was just gonna say it's pretty comparable. All right. Well, that was fun. So I think really in conclusion, it's about personal preference. I love my machine, so I'm gonna continue. But if you want to break for your machine, sit back, relax, hand sew. That's totally fine too.
I had no idea how fast that was. That's awesome. I might have tested it out just a little bit, but I love my hand sewing too, so I might have to do a little give and take.
We can go again if you want to, Norris. Just let me know.
Rematch. Oh, this has been so much fun. I have actually learned so much about buttonholes. I think I need to now make more blouses, and I know my husband, he's gonna be getting some more shirts in, and maybe I'll teach him how to do this as well. So thank you so much for joining us.
Yes.
Well, thank y'all for having me. It was so fun. I can't wait to do it again.
Yeah, come back anytime.
Yes, you're always welcome.
I feel like we just learned everything there is to know about both buttonholes and buttons in terms of sewing them and placing them and tips and tricks and tools. And wow, so much we covered. What did you learn? Is there anything that you're taking away and doing something new?
Well, I think I really need to invest in some new tools because now I really want a buttonhole cutter. I think I'm going to try Norris's tip of doing the fray check first before I cut the buttonhole. I think that'll come in handy.
Yeah, I think I'm going to maybe stop using a rotary cutter to cut out my holes and actually invest in, as you said, getting more tools in a button cutter, because I have a feeling I'm going to be doing it a lot more.
I know. So I think what we did today was really cover some great basics, and I think from there you can really do a little bit more experimenting with placement. I have a shirt here that I've made with just a double button to add some extra visual interest. But there's just so much you can do with buttons. They're actually really pretty fun and exciting.
I know, who would have thought?
I know, who would have thought?
Oh, all right, this has been so much fun, and thank you for watching Stitch Lab. Can't wait to see all your button-up blouses and even pants too, a button-up fly front.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's not just tops here, any garment.
That's right. So tune in next time.